Good morning. Let's spend some time this morning thinking about what is really basic to Unitarian Universalism, a denomination whose original names are all but meaningless to us today. This isn't unique to us. American denominations often bear names associated with ecclesiastical organization or theological positions that bear little relationship to their current life. You know, if you're an Episcopalian or a Presbyterian, that says something about the polity, the governance of your congregation. Unitarians and Universalists grew out of Congregationalism. That was a name that described, how congregations were governed. I don't think any of you are here today because this congregation has an annual membership meeting. That's just my guess. I haven't done a survey. I don't think Presbyterians think much about the Westminster Confession or Episcopalians about the 39 Articles. The name Unitarian comes because our founders did not believe in the Trinity. And the name Universalist comes from the belief in universal salvation, that everybody goes to heaven. Now, I don't know about this congregation, but my guess is that most Unitarian Universalists have never heard these doctrines preached from a pulpit. In fact, these days, you could be a Unitarian who believes in the Trinity and a Universalist who believes that when you die, you're dead, and that's it. We are largely identified by our social action and our liberal views. These are certainly things that make this a good home for me, but that's not all that we are. Our views and good works flow from and are reinforced by ideas that underlay how we believe and how we underlay how we behave in the world. Indeed, I think we have a good message for the world. Let's call that message our gospel. Now, we don't use the word gospel much in our denomination, particularly those of us who tend humanist, but it's a good word. The word gospel comes to us by way of the Greek, Latin, and Anglo-Saxon. We get the word evangelism from the Greek and Latin words for good news, and which in Anglo-Saxon was Godspell, meaning good story. So this morning, I'm going to be Mike the Evangelist, speaking to you about the Unitarian Universalist gospel, our good news. And we've got news to proclaim. In fact, we have some uppercase good news, capital G, capital N, and some lowercase good news, small g, small n. They're both good, but I think it's important for us to know which is which. Now, I'm using good news somewhat playfully this morning, but also seriously. And also, with apologies to our Universalist side, I'm focusing mostly on our Unitarian side. What is our good news, our fundamental message? I'll try to talk about this morning and to make a distinction between our social action and the ideas which underlie them. They are interrelated but distinct parts of who we are. Our social action and the support and the causes that we support are crucial to all we are, but they're not all that we are. And so I'm using the idea of good news this morning to try to make this distinction. I believe we have some significant good news. So let's start by considering the lowercase good news. I'm defining this kind of good news as really important and fundamental to what we do, but still different from our uppercase good news. I'm going to give some examples and then explain. I am so happy that my home congregation is active in the community. I am so happy that we do good things. I would not want to belong to a congregation that was not involved in building a better world. Unitarian Universalist congregations all over the country are engaging in anti-racism work, are engaging, we're looking at white supremacy in American institutions and in American history. We're looking at it in our own churches and denomination, and we're looking at it in our own lives. That's good news. We have worked on, indeed we're still working on, issues of gender, sexual orientation, and sexual identity. We've developed a developed a welcoming congregation program so that congregations can justifiably signal that they are welcoming congregations. That's good news. And while it seems natural today, it was the result of a long, and I would add continuing process. None of this good news came without effort. These were not easy, automatic things. Our attitude toward LGBTQ+ people was not always welcoming. Congregations debated hanging rainbow flags. Coming out against apartheid was not always a given. In some periods of our history, in some parts of our country, our religion represented the conservative establishment. It took work to become the denomination we are, or more accurately, to become the denomination that we are becoming. Now, if I were talking to someone who was looking for a new religious fellowship and wanted to know more about us, I would certainly want them to know about this kind of good news, and I would tell them about it. The good news things that we have done and are doing say a lot about the kind of community we are. They are important to do because they make us who we are and who we want to be. It's good news that we do these things, but they're not our uppercase good news. We do the things that that I've been talking about because our uppercase, capital G, capital N good news, calls us to do them. You could say we do them not because they're our purpose, but because they are our job. They are the outward signs of our inner belief. Some people might come to us because they like our stances on causes, and I certainly hope that they do. But our stance on causes is not the capital G good news we proclaim. They are behaviors. These efforts at social justice and racial equality and all these other good things that we do, they are behaviors that flow from an underlying, more basic, capital letter good news that we proclaim. So let's look at our capital G good news, the ideas and practices that underlay all of our good works. And the best way to start is at the beginning, with the first systematic and very popular proclamation of our good news, which happened in Baltimore in 1819, preaching at the ordination of Jared Sparks, the Baltimore congregation's first minister, at a time when biblical criticism and the historical approach to religion were in their infancy. The Reverend William Ellery Channing made a number of radical statements, some of which still speak to us today. Now, I could spend 90 minutes analyzing his 90-minute sermon, but I won't. Here's just a few points that I think are important. Preaching from 1 Thessalonians 21, prove all things, hold fast to that which is good. He urged the congregation to bring their intelligence to the Bible, just as they would to any other document. In other words, in my paraphrase here, think, people, use your minds. He discarded much of the Bible as time-bound and inapplicable to modern times. When we read the Bible, he said, it is, and here I am quoting him, it is our bounden duty to exercise our reason upon it perpetually, to compare, to infer, to look beyond the letter to the spirit, to seek in the nature of the subject and the aim of the writer his true meaning, and in general, to make use of what is known for explaining what is difficult and for discovering new truths. Think about this. We recognize that religious ideas are subject to the same scrutiny as other ideas, and that religion exists in time, that some religious teachings that might have been right for one time are not right for ours, and that we are to use reason to discover these new truths. Yes, discovering new truth. We believe that humankind is still discovering truth. Humans will develop new insights, new ways of looking, both inward and outward, will set new standards and seek to rise to them. New discoveries in science, rather than being enemies of religion, open new vistas of awe, wonder, and mystery. Implicit in this idea is that religion, any religion, including our own, is not static. We believe, we know, we have experienced in our own lives that denominations can grow and change, just as people can. We have experienced this in our own denomination. We are not the denomination that Channing helped found. Indeed, it only took a few years before Channing's brand of Unitarianism became somewhat old-fashioned, and new expressions of Unitarianism began to evolve. By the end of the 19th century, and I know I'm telescoping a lot of history here, but by the end of the 19th century, a non-Christian humanist Unitarianism evolved that would seem familiar to many of us today. In the 20th century, we've welcomed neo-pagans and followers of earth-centered religion into our community. Now, some people, I have to tell you, were unhappy with this religious evolution. In my own congregation in Baltimore, some wealthy members were so unhappy with this movement that in the 1890s, they financed a Tiffany glass mosaic of the Last Supper, which still dominates our sanctuary wall. If you could imagine, if standing behind me today was a huge Tiffany glass mosaic of what our minister David Carlson calls Jesus and his posse, there at the table. But evolve we did, and this is the key point here: that nobody got forced out. All had a home. We managed to include everybody, and I'll come back to this. The point I'm making here is that the capital G, capital N good news is that religion is an evolving institution, and we are an evolving religion. And the really good news is that you and I are part of this evolution. We are making it happen. Channing did his part, and now we are doing ours. Furthermore, more you gospel here, we are honest about what we know and what we don't know. We are open to truth and to insight and to how to lead a good life wherever we can find the truth and insight. This leads us to the liberating news that no religion, including our own, has the whole truth or the final truth. This builds in, or should build in, a sense of our own limitations, and thus humility in our engagement with the world. As a corollary to this, we are comfortable with doubt, comfortable about not having final answers. We have our truth, our gospel, our good news, but we know that other approaches to religion, other approaches to leading a meaningful, ethical, caring life also have value. We are open to learning from them. I find this comforting. You know, we're a small denomination, and we don't have to save the whole world by ourselves. We got other folks that we can work with. Okay, now so far you might be thinking, good enough with your good news about religion and how denominations work and all that, but what's your good news for me as a person? You might be thinking, these ideas are good, but religious life is lived in congregations. If I'm a member of a Unitarian Universalist congregation, what does this mean for me? Well, I'm glad you asked. The best statement I've ever read about what a congregation should be doing comes from the Geneva, Illinois congregation, little uptown, upriver on the Fox River from where I grew up in Illinois. In 1842, when they founded, they declared their purpose. We could call it their good news. And this is what they wrote then, and they still hold as their covenant. Being desirous of promoting practical goodness in the world and aiding each other in our moral and religious improvement, we have associated ourselves together, not as agreeing in opinion, not as having attained universal truth in belief or perfection in character, but as seekers after truth and goodness. But as seekers after truth and goodness. Promoting practical goodness in the world, in modern terms, social action. Aiding each other's moral and religious improvement, spiritual development, a statement of community. Not necessarily agreeing with each other's, not people who have attained, but as seekers. And you read a statement this morning about your community and your goals, very similar to these, different language, but quite similar. Note what is not in this statement. It is not a statement of belief. What it says is that these are our aspirations, and more importantly, by implication, that we can do this, we can do these things. Helping each other, we can achieve these things. We can live our lives this way. In that sense, though not formally a creed, it is a statement of profound belief. This little congregation in 19th century Illinois, which would have been much less diverse socially and theologically, and in I think almost any respects than many of today's Unitarian Universalist congregations, this little congregation put its finger on what binds our very diverse congregations and denominations. We are here to help each other in a mutually beneficial way. Let me say that again, because I think it's important. We are here to help each other in a mutually beneficial way. Some congregations make it a practice by ending their services by singing, and you're probably familiar with it in the gray hymnal, from you we receive, to you we give, together we share, and by this we live. These are not just words for show. We welcome you just as you are to join our community. We encourage your growth to where you want to be. I'm emphasizing you as a unique, irreplaceable individual, but we do this in community. We recognize people come here trailing clouds of identities and belong to multiple communities. We try to see all these aspects of you, but we also try to see you as that unique individual before us, a person of worth and dignity. We, Unitarian Universalists, trust you to use your mind, to use your emotions, and to use your experience to find the path that you want to travel. We believe that a religious fellowship does not need to have a doctrine dictated to it, that we can build an intimate, supportive fellowship of people who believe very different things about some ultimates, about whether there is a God or gods, or life after death, or whatever. We believe that it is possible to do this, to succeed in creating a pluralistic culture, and we try our best to live that culture. That is good news indeed. Cultivating racial and social diversities in our congregations is a work in progress, but we have certainly succeeded in theological diversity. Indeed, here our goal is not simply diversity, but pluralism, and which is defined by the Pluralism Project at Harvard University as the energetic engagement with diversity. The energetic engagement with diversity. It's not just getting along. We don't want, in the words of the Pluralism Project, mere diversity without real encounter and relationship. We want real encounter. We want real relationship. What this means, for example, is that I, as a humanist who doesn't believe in a God, I want to hear from those of you who do, so that I might learn from you and better understand you and be able to support you in your beliefs. And I hope that you will also be willing to try to understand me as a humanist. The point is this: our religious growth comes not just from ideas and practices which we share and are familiar with, which we're familiar with, but also from ideas and practices which are different from our own. What will make us individually and collectively strong is for each of us to examine our own ideas and to lovingly and respectfully articulate them, live them, and from the grounding of our approach, to listen to those who approach our mutual journey from a different perspective. How do we meet this challenge? When we do it well. And when we do it well, we transcend the labels humanist, theist, or whatever other labels we use to describe the kind of Unitarian Universalists we are. When we focus on our dreams, aspirations, and community, we do so deeply and well. Indeed, we are at our best when we talk to each other, when we find ways to express our differences along with our commonality. These attitudes that I've just discussed are very important as rules of the road and what we might call procedural beliefs. Respect others' beliefs. Feel free to adopt the best and most workable, and so forth. This attitude helps us to peacefully live with differences. The good news is that people can find ways to do this, and we have found one of those ways. We have discovered that we don't have to believe exactly the same thing to have a successful, enhancing religious community. The shared spiritual life, and however you define spiritual, and I know you probably do in different ways, that shared spiritual life doesn't depend on uniformity of belief, other than the belief that we can travel the path together, abiding by some simple rules of the road. I think our congregations model for the larger society that communities can exist and flourish without being uniform in belief if they are unified by mutual respect. And that's another thing I want to repeat, because it may seem surprising to us because we sometimes seem countercultural, that we can be a model for the rest of our larger communities by showing how people, through mutual respect, can get along and have an enhancing community. Finally, and I'm getting near the end, the good news that makes all of this work, our concern for the conduct of life trumps belief questions. We often express this as deed before creed. What do you believe is an important question, but what we're really interested in is how your belief influences your behavior toward your fellow human beings and for this natural world we live in. Do your beliefs affect how you walk in the world? We believe that working together, we can be better people, creating that better world. That's good news indeed. And here's where our lowercase good news and our uppercase good news meet. All these good news things that we do, our social action, our being open and welcoming, our respect for the individual before us, flow from and support and enhance our uppercase good news. The lowercase good news gives action and life to our uppercase good news. Our gospel only lives as we make it live. So this then is our gospel, our two kinds of good news. I urge you to spread both kinds of good news by your words and by your actions. Proclaim it to the world. We believe that human beings acting together become better people and can make a better world, and that we will be better people in that better world. To borrow from that great Rosie the Riveter slogan from World War II, our good news is that we can do it. We can do it. We can be better people in a better world. And let us say, we shall do it. We shall do it.